On the 21st of February, 1986, Nintendo released a game by the name of the Hyrule Fantasy: The Legend of Zelda to Japan onto the Famicom Disk System. A year and a half later, on the 22nd of August, 1987, the game was released to a much wider audience on the Nintendo Entertainment System in the USA. Its release was so successful that developers decided to turn it into the video game series we all know and love today. Since that first game, we've been given different companions, enemies, kingdoms of Hyrule, and some completely new worlds, but one thing almost always stays the same: the character we play as, Link. Obviously, apart from the most recent game in the series, Echoes of Wisdom, Link is our protagonist for each game. If you've played a Zelda game, you know that one of his most defining traits is that he isn't the most talkative. There's many instances where he does interact with other characters, but most of those interactions are chosen by you, the player. It does vary from game to game, but especially in recent games, it's been more prevalent that the hero is not the most vocal of people. It's even become sort of a meme in the Zelda community. Like mentioned before, you as the player do choose what the hero says to NPCs during gameplay, and I think part of the reason we don't hear him speak is so that we do get a little more freedom in choosing the interactions that we as the player want, and as Aonuma has stated, he is the link between us and Hyrule. But there are also canonical reasons given as to why the hero doesn't speak, and today we're going to get into that and discuss everything we know about why he's the silent hero. After multiple delays, on the 3rd of March 2017, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was released worldwide to the Nintendo Switch and the Wii U. The game was like no other Zelda game before it, with a massive open world, optional mini-dungeons scattered throughout the map, and of course, voice acting. Although there aren't many actual cutscenes where you, the player, are actually there, the game gives us a couple of Link's pivotal memories that we get to look back on, and all of them feature voice lines from the characters surrounding Link, but never Link himself. We never get to hear him speak once, even when he's directly spoken to. Link does of course have a voice actor, but he doesn't actually speak. He just grunts and makes noises from time to time. The Link we see in Breath of the Wild also doesn't use much body language or facial expressions to express himself, unlike in some other games where the hero is extremely expressive, even if he doesn't speak much, or at all. The Link we see is much more of a blank slate. It's almost depressing. The only few times we see him smile is when cooking or eating, which honestly I understand. The game itself does actually give us a canonical explanation as to why Link doesn't speak. When searching Hyrule Castle, if you happen to find and read Zelda's diary, she actually acknowledges the fact that he's always silent, and goes on to ask him why. Her diary states, "Bit by bit, I've gotten Link to open up to me. When I finally got around to asking why he's so quiet all the time, I could tell it was difficult for him to say, but he did. With so much at stake, and so many eyes upon him, he feels it necessary to stay strong and to silently bear any burden, a feeling I know all too well. For him, it has caused him to stop outwardly expressing his thoughts and feelings. I always believed him to be simply a gifted person who had never faced a day of hardship. How wrong I was. Everyone has struggles that go unseen by the world. I was so absorbed with my own problems, I failed to see his. I wish to talk with him more and to see what lies beneath those calm waters, to hear him speak freely and openly, and perhaps I, too, will be able to bare my soul to him and share the demons that have plagued me all these years." The diary entry explains why Link is always silent. He bears such a big responsibility that he feels it is necessary to remain silent to be strong. In this diary, we also see that he did speak to the princess to let her know, showing that he isn't completely silent all the time. It's just a choice he's made, and not something he physically cannot do. Being the princess's appointed knight is such a great responsibility that could be a burden on anyone. To make sure he does his job correctly, he almost completely shuts down all outward emotion. He has to protect her while she tries her best to discover her powers, and he can't let anything, including his own thoughts and feelings, get in the way of that. He has to be strong at all times, no matter what. Tears of the Kingdom is a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, with the same Link and Zelda from the previous game, but we don't get much new info on whether Link is still always silent or not. He is, of course, still the princess's appointed knight, but I feel like there's less pressure this time around. Like Breath of the Wild, we don't see him speak to anyone within any cutscenes, but just because we don't get to hear him speak doesn't mean he is as silent anymore. In my personal opinion, I feel like the choice of us not hearing Link speak is the best one. Even though the game gives us so many interactions with other characters, he's still extremely reserved and quiet. I think now, more than it being a responsibility thing where he's shutting down and that's why he doesn't speak, it's a personal thing. Link as a character is just more reserved. He's so used to being quiet and keeping things to himself that he just prefers it that way. I think another reason he could be so quiet is because he doesn't need to talk that often. We never really do get to see them together too much, but when Link and Zelda travel beside each other, I feel like she speaks for herself and prefers it that way. The dynamic between them is perfect, meaning Link can stay quiet to himself without worrying, and the princess can express herself without feeling like her personal knight is in the way. To me, Link's silence in Tears of the Kingdom feels much less depressing. There's still threat, of course, but I feel like the time in between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, he's grown as a character, and like I said, instead of not speaking because he feels he needs to be strong all the time, he's just an introvert. As mentioned earlier, the most recent game in the series, Echoes of Wisdom, is the first and so far only Zelda game where Link isn't the protagonist that we play as we instead play as Princess Zelda. She embarks on her adventure to save her kingdom, as well as Link, a knight she didn't know at all before her adventure. Even though we don't play as Link, his character still remains silent, and there is actually a canonical reason as to why. Right outside of Soothorn Village, there is a Sheikah man by the name of Luberry, who has been researching the rifts that have been opening up within Hyrule. In the basement of his house, you can find a diary, and in said diary, it's stated that in the past, a group of kids, including Link, fell into the rift. The rift caused each child to lose something, and the thing Link had lost turned out to be his voice. This next part does include a spoiler for the end of the game, so if you haven't finished it yet, please skip to the timestamp shown on screen. A cute little side note is that at the end of the game, when the rifts have disappeared and the final boss, Null, has been defeated, we actually get to see Link with a speech bubble animation for the first time, with everyone around him acting shocked. The rifts being gone have returned his voice to him, showing how this incarnation of Link probably does like to talk when he can. Link being silent wasn't always the case for Echoes of Wisdom though, as during development, Nintendo actually had the idea to give Link's character actual dialogue for the first time. Since Princess Zelda was the silent protagonist this time around, they wanted to change things up, but when they actually implemented the change and Link started talking, they stated that it didn't feel quite right, so they scrapped the idea. I think it's pretty well known now that one of Link's unique traits is the fact that he doesn't speak, and changing that now after all of these years, even when we aren't playing as him, didn't feel right at all. Link is the kind of character where it feels like his actions will always speak louder than any word could. He doesn't say a word, and yet he's perhaps the most loved character in the series. And of course as the main character he will be loved, but part of the reason people love him so much is because of his silence. I think the lack of speech really does make it easier for any player to feel connected to him in the way Nintendo always intended. You really feel like you become him as soon as you pick up that controller. Within each game, he has his own personality that does shine through in the way he acts, but it isn't over the top. This makes it so much easier for anyone playing to connect to who he is, and like I said, almost become the character. Link proves that anyone can be heroic and brave like him, no matter who you are or how you act. The connection between the character and the player is just so important, and his lack of speech does play a big part in that. Eiji Aonuma describes it perfectly. If Link said something the user doesn't agree with, that relationship between the user and Link would be lost. There have been discussions about whether Link will ever get any lines in any future Zelda games, with the producer of the series, Eiji Aonuma, responding to this question, stated in an interview in 2016. We've had a lot of requests from fans to hear Link's voice, and while in some ways I do feel that it could be good to have a game where he speaks, part of me also feels that that air of proud independence he has, because he doesn't speak, is a precious part of the individuality of his character. I want to think long and hard about whether changing that would be for the better or not before I make any decision. So it seems that the chance of Link getting a voice or any dialogue anytime soon is slim to none, but who knows? The most unexpected things can happen. After all, we did get a game where Zelda is the protagonist, which many Zelda players never thought would happen, and it ended up being an amazing game. Link is iconic for being a silent character. Giving him a voice or dialogue would have to be done correctly to not lose what makes Link Link. But it seems like an impossible task to make everyone happy, which makes me believe it wouldn't be possible. Will we ever see Link get a voice in a future game? Let me know what you think in the comments.